Göbekli Tepe and cave art, prehistoric civilizations, 2-hour sleep learning, deep rest, breathe in, 3, 4, hold and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, in slowly, 2, 3, 4. Your shoulders are soft, melting, releasing. Your jaw is loose, relaxed, open. Today drifts away, all thoughts dissolving into peace. As you rest tonight, your mind gently organizes everything you already know about humanity's earliest civilizations, about Göbekli Tepe, about hunter-gatherers, about the first sacred sites, about art painted on ancient cave walls, effortlessly, naturally. Your understanding deepens without effort. Your mind absorbs peacefully. Now we begin. In this moment of quietness, you are entering a space where humanity's first civilizations exist. Not cities yet, but gatherings. Communities, sacred places built by people who still hunted and gathered, who had not yet settled into farming, but who were already creating beauty, meaning, connection. You already hold this knowledge somewhere within you, perhaps through reading, through curiosity, through a deep fascination with where humans came from. Tonight, as you rest, this understanding settles more deeply, organizing naturally, integrating gently, without any effort from you. The story of prehistoric civilizations is the story of the first human creativity, the first monuments, the first art, the first gatherings for ritual and meaning. These are not primitive attempts, but sophisticated expressions of human consciousness awakening to itself, to beauty, to the sacred. When you rest with these understandings, your brain is simply weaving them together, strengthening the connections, letting them become part of your deeper knowing. You are safe, comfortable, and ready to absorb. Imagine a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, the land called Upper Mesopotamia. About 11,000 years ago, before pottery, before metal tools, before the wheel, before writing, before agriculture became established, people gathered on this hill. They carved massive stones from the earth, T-shaped pillars, some weighing as much as 10 tons. They arranged these pillars in circles, creating enclosures, sacred spaces. Göbekli Tepe, which means potbelly hill in Turkish, is the oldest known temple complex in the world. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. They still moved with the seasons, following herds of gazelle, gathering wild grains, yet they invested enormous time and energy into creating this place. This suggests something profound, that the need for sacred gathering spaces, for ritual, for connection to the divine, may have come before settled life itself. On the pillars at Göbekli Tepe, artisans carved animals: foxes, lions, bulls, scorpions, vultures, snakes. These animals are rendered with skill and attention, each carved in relief, standing out from the stone, watching over the sacred space. Some scholars believe these animals represented spiritual forces, totems, or the creatures that inhabited the spiritual realm. Your mind is gently absorbing this, recognizing that 11,000 years ago, humans were already capable of monumental construction, of artistic expression, of organized ritual. This is not the beginning of civilization, but clear evidence that human consciousness was already fully awake, already yearning for meaning. And now, gently, we explore this understanding anew. Imagine that Göbekli Tepe is like a stone book, written before writing existed. Each pillar is a page. Each carved animal is a symbol, a word in a language we can only partially read. The people who created this place were speaking not with words alone, but with stone and space and arrangement. They were saying something about their relationship to the cosmos, to the animals they hunted, to forces larger than themselves. What is remarkable is that these people had no permanent homes yet. They lived lightly on the land, moving with seasons and herds. Yet they chose to invest their energy, not in shelter for themselves, but in creating sacred space. This tells us something essential, that the human need for spiritual connection, for ritual, for shared meaning, may be as fundamental as the need for food and shelter. Göbekli Tepe changes how we understand the story of civilization. We used to believe that agriculture came first, that only after people settled did they build temples. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite, that sacred gathering came first, and perhaps the need to stay near sacred sites, to feed the gatherings, contributed to the development of agriculture. Your understanding deepens, recognizing that spirituality is not something that developed later, but may be woven into the very origins of human culture. When archaeologist Klaus Schmidt uncovered Göbekli Tepe in 1994, the discovery sent shock waves through the archaeological world. Here was undeniable evidence that contradicted long-held beliefs about how civilization began. The site was used continuously for about 1,500 years, from around 9600 to 8200 BCE. Different enclosures were built, used, and then deliberately filled in with earth and rubble. almost as if each generation created their own sacred space, then buried it, then built a new on top. Archaeological evidence shows that thousands of wild animal bones, gazelle, deer, wild pigs, were found at the site. These were the remains of feasts, of communal meals, of gatherings where people from different hunter-gatherer bands came together, shared food, performed rituals, strengthened social bonds. In your own life, you may recognize this pattern, that gathering together, sharing meals, creating sacred or meaningful space, these are still fundamental human needs. When you gather with others for celebration, for ritual, for connection, you are participating in something that reaches back 11,000 years, to the very dawn of human culture. Your understanding resonates with this. You recognize that Göbekli Tepe is not ancient and alien, but deeply familiar. It speaks to something in you that still knows the importance of sacred space, of gathering, of connection to forces larger than the individual. The understanding settles into you now. Göbekli Tepe, 11,000 years old, massive stone pillars carved by hunter-gatherers, the world's oldest temple, evidence that spiritual life may have preceded agriculture. This knowing is integrating naturally, becoming part of you. For most of human existence, nearly 300,000 years, people lived as hunter-gatherers. This was not a desperate struggle for survival, but a sophisticated and successful way of life, deeply adapted to local environments, sustainable and often abundant. Hunter-gatherers moved with the seasons, following herds of animals as they migrated, gathering plants as they ripened, fishing when runs were abundant. They knew their territories intimately. Every plant, every animal, every water source, every shelter. This knowledge was passed down through generations, embedded in stories, in songs, in careful teaching. Their diet was remarkably diverse, not dependent on just one or two crops, but drawing from dozens or even hundreds of different food sources. Wild grains, nuts, berries, roots, tubers, game animals large and small, fish, shellfish. This diversity meant they received a wide range of nutrients. Modern research suggests that hunter-gatherers were often healthier than early agricultural peoples. Hunter-gatherer societies were typically egalitarian. Without permanent property or stored wealth, there was less inequality. Decisions were made collectively. Leadership was based on skill and wisdom rather than inherited power. People shared food freely, because tomorrow someone else might make the successful hunt, and you would benefit from their generosity. Your mind is gently organizing this understanding, recognizing that hunter-gatherer life was not primitive desperation, but a refined and effective way of living that sustained humanity for hundreds of thousands of years and allowed for leisure, for art, for spiritual development, for all the things that make us human. And as you rest, sense this understanding in a new way. Imagine that hunter-gatherer life is like a dance with the landscape, not controlling the land, but moving with it, responding to its rhythms, its seasons, its offerings. When the berries ripen, you go to where the berries are. When the herds move, you move with them. When the salmon run, you gather at the rivers. This is not weakness or lack of planning, but deep wisdom, and understanding that the land provides if you know how to listen, how to observe, how to work with natural rhythms rather than against them. The hunter-gatherer does not force, but flows, does not dominate, but participates. In their movement, there is freedom. No need to defend territory because territory is vast and shared. No need to accumulate possessions because you must carry everything you own. This simplicity creates space for relationship, for story, for art, for spiritual practice. The transition to agriculture, which began about 12,000 years ago in some places, was not necessarily progress in every dimension. It brought new possibilities, but also new challenges. Agriculture required staying in one place, defending territory, storing food, which created new forms of inequality, new diseases, new social hierarchies. The hunter-gatherer way, while changed, was not inferior, simply different. Your understanding integrates this nuance, recognizing that human history is not a simple story of constant improvement, but a series of trade-offs, gains in some areas, losses in others. When you walk in nature today, when you notice which plants are edible, which animals are present, when you feel connected to the land around you, you are tapping into knowledge that your ancestors held for hundreds of thousands of years. Modern research on contemporary hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Sand People of Southern Africa, the Hadza of Tanzania, reveals that their way of life can be remarkably sustainable and satisfying. They often work fewer hours per day to meet their needs than agricultural or industrial peoples. The rest of their time is spent in leisure, in socializing, in ritual, in art, in rest. The archaeological evidence from Paleolithic and Mesolithic sites shows that hunter-gatherers had time to create. They made elaborate tools, not just functional, but beautiful. They carved figurines, they painted, they made music, they buried their dead with care and ceremony. All of this requires leisure, requires that basic needs are met with time and energy to spare. Your understanding deepens, recognizing that your own deep human needs for connection to nature, for community, for beauty, for meaning, these were all met within the hunter-gatherer way of life. These needs did not emerge recently. They are ancient. They are who we have always been. The story of stone tools is the story of human ingenuity. Starting at least 2.6 million years ago, our ancestors began to shape stones deliberately, to create edges for cutting, points for piercing, surfaces for pounding. The earliest tools, called Oldowan tools, were simple but effective. A hammerstone, used to strike another stone, creating sharp flakes. These flakes could cut meat, scrape hides, work wood. They opened up new possibilities for survival, for processing food, for making other tools. By about 1.76 million years ago, early humans developed hand axes. These were larger tools, carefully shaped on both sides with symmetrical forms. Hand axes required planning, skill, an ability to see the finished tool within the raw stone. They represent a leap in cognitive ability, in the capacity to imagine and execute. As time progressed, stone tool technology became increasingly sophisticated. The Mesolithic period, the Middle Stone Age, saw the development of microliths, tiny, precisely shaped stone tools that could be hafted onto wooden or bone shafts, creating composite tools, spears with stone points, arrows, sickles with multiple small blades set in wood. By the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age, people developed grinding and polishing techniques. Tools were not just flaked but ground smooth, making them sharper, more durable, more beautiful. Axes were polished until they gleamed. These were not just tools but objects of pride, of craft, sometimes of ritual significance. Your mind is absorbing this progression, recognizing that each innovation built on previous knowledge, each generation teaching the next, refining techniques, experimenting, solving problems. This is the foundation of all technology, of all human progress. Gently now, experience this understanding differently. Think of stone tool development like language evolving. At first, simple sounds, basic meanings, but over time, grammar emerges. Poetry becomes possible. Complex ideas can be expressed. The tools follow the same pattern, simple at first, but gradually becoming more complex, more specialized, more expressive. A hand axe is not just a tool for cutting. It is also a demonstration of skill, of patience, of aesthetic sense. Many hand axes are more symmetrical and refined than strictly necessary for function. This suggests that even 1.7 million years ago, humans cared about beauty, about doing things well, about creating objects that pleased the eye and the hand. The development of composite tools, hafted tools with separate components, represents thinking in systems. Understanding that wood and stone together can do what neither can do alone. This is abstract thinking, the ability to imagine combinations, to innovate, to create solutions that don't exist in nature. By the Neolithic, stone tools had reached an almost art form. Polished jade axes found in Europe were so beautiful they were traded over long distances, kept for generations, buried with important people. They had transcended mere utility. They had become symbols of status, of connection, of value beyond function. Your understanding deepens, recognizing that tools are not just practical objects, but expressions of human creativity, of our capacity to transform the world and ourselves through making. When you use a knife today, when you appreciate a well-made tool, when you feel satisfaction in crafting something with your own hands, you are connecting to a tradition that stretches back millions of years. The earliest stone tools were made by striking one stone with another, a technique called percussion flaking. If you have ever tried this, you know it requires skill. The angle must be right, the force must be controlled. One wrong strike and the stone shatters uselessly. Learning this skill took time, attention, practice. Young people learned by watching elders, by trying again and again until the movement became natural. This transmission of knowledge, from experienced to inexperienced, from old to young, is how human culture works. You possess skills today because someone taught you, someone who learned from someone before them. The chain is unbroken, reaching back through time, connecting you to the first tool makers. Stone Age peoples also made tools from bone, from antler, from wood, from shell, but these materials decay and rarely survive. The stone tools remain, and from them we can read the story of increasing sophistication, of innovation, of the human capacity to see problems and create solutions. Your understanding resonates. You recognize that the tools we use today, however advanced, rest on foundations laid millions of years ago. Every technology builds on what came before. We are still tool makers, still problem solvers, still carrying forward the work our ancestors began. Deep within caves in Europe, in France and Spain primarily, but also in other parts of the world, ancient peoples created art that still speaks across 30,000 years. These are not crude scratchings, but sophisticated paintings and engravings of animals, of hands, of mysterious symbols. The Chauvet Cave in southern France contains some of the oldest known paintings, created about 30,000 to 33,000 years ago. The walls are covered with images of horses, lions, bears, rhinoceroses, mammoths. The artists used charcoal for black, ochre for red and yellow. They understood shading, perspective, the use of the cave wall's natural contours to give animals three-dimensional form. Lascaux Cave, also in France, contains paintings from about 17,000 years ago. The Hall of Bulls shows massive aurochs, ancient wild cattle, running across the stone, their power captured in sweeping lines, their movement frozen yet somehow still alive. Nearly 2,000 figures fill this cave. Animals, human figures, abstract signs. These paintings were not created in living spaces. The caves were not homes, they were special places, deep in the earth where people went for ritual, for ceremony, for connection with the spirit world. They carried torches or oil lamps into the darkness. They prepared the walls. They mixed their pigments. They painted with brushes made from fur or chewed sticks. Sometimes they blew pigment through hollow bones to create stencils of their hands. Your mind is gently absorbing this, understanding that these ancient artists were not different from you. They had the same human needs for expression, for meaning, for beauty, for connection to forces larger than themselves. Their art was not primitive, but fully human, fully sophisticated. And as sleep draws closer, sense this understanding anew. Imagine that the caves are like cathedrals, sacred spaces set apart from ordinary life. You do not enter casually, but with intention, with respect, with preparation. The darkness is absolute except for flickering firelight. The walls shimmer with images that seem to move in the unstable light. Animals appear to run, to breathe, to watch you. Some scholars believe these caves were places where shamans, spiritual practitioners, would enter trance states. The combination of darkness, flickering light, acoustic properties that create echoes and resonance, sensory deprivation, perhaps rhythmic music or chanting, all of this could induce altered states of consciousness, states in which the boundary between human and animal, between physical and spiritual, becomes permeable. The animals painted on cave walls are not random. They are carefully chosen. Often they are animals that were powerful, dangerous, or spiritually significant. The cave lion, the bear, the mammoth, the bison. These were creatures that humans competed with, hunted, feared, admired. To paint them was perhaps to enter into relationship with them, to honor them, to gain their power or their permission. Handprints appear in many caves, made by pressing a hand against the wall and blowing pigment around it. These are signatures. These are declarations. I was here. I exist. I am human and I make my mark. When you look at a 30,000-year-old handprint, you are seeing the actual size of someone's hand. You are touching across time, recognizing your kinship. Your understanding deepens, recognizing that art is not decoration, but essential communication, essential meaning-making, essential humanity. When you create art today, when you feel moved by a beautiful image, when you visit a museum or gallery, you are participating in something that began in Paleolithic caves, the human need to create, to express, to make visible what is invisible. This need is ancient. The painters of Lascaux and Chauvet had to work in difficult conditions, deep in caves where no natural light reached, carrying torches or lamps, standing in cold and darkness, creating scaffolding to reach high walls, preparing pigments by grinding minerals and mixing them with water or fat. This was not casual doodling. This was serious work, requiring planning, skill, commitment. The quality of the art proves that these were not the first attempts. The artists were skilled. They had apprenticed. They had practiced. They belonged to traditions of art making that were already ancient, even 30,000 years ago. How much older the first art is, we may never know, because earlier work may have been on perishable materials, on wood, on bark, on skin, on sand. Only the cave paintings survive. Your understanding integrates this, recognizing that when you look at prehistoric art, you are not looking at the beginning, but at a moment in an already long tradition. Human creativity, human symbolism, human spirituality, these are older than we can measure. woven into the very fabric of what it means to be human. About 12,000 years ago, in several regions around the world, human societies began to shift from mobile hunter-gatherer life to increasingly settled agricultural life. This transition, called the Neolithic Revolution, changed everything, not all at once, but gradually over thousands of years. In the Fertile Crescent, the arc of land stretching from the eastern Mediterranean through modern Turkey and Iraq, people began to cultivate wild grains, wheat, barley, lentils. They began to domesticate animals, goats, sheep, pigs, cattle. Slowly, these plants and animals changed, shaped by human selection, becoming larger, more productive, more dependent on human care. The reasons for this shift are debated. Climate change at the end of the Ice Age may have made wild food sources less reliable. Population pressure may have required more intensive food production. Or perhaps, as Göbekli Tepe suggests, the desire to stay near sacred gathering places encouraged people to find ways to produce food locally. Whatever the causes, the effects were profound. Settled life meant permanent houses, villages formed, population density increased. With stored grain came the possibility of surplus, and with surplus came specialization. Some people could focus on making pottery, others on weaving, others on ritual or governance. Inequality emerged, as some accumulated more than others. The Neolithic site of Çatalhöyük in central Turkey, occupied from about 7100 to 5900 BCE, shows what these early settlements looked like. Dense housing, houses built wall-to-wall with no streets, entered through the roof, decorated with paintings and sculptures, elaborate burials under the floors. This was a community of perhaps 8,000 people living in close proximity, creating culture, art, tradition. Your mind is gently organizing this understanding, recognizing that the Neolithic transition was not simple progress, but a complex transformation with both gains and losses. New possibilities emerged, but so did new challenges. And gently now, sense this transition in a different way. Imagine that the shift from hunting-gathering to agriculture is like choosing to plant a garden rather than forage in the forest. When you forage, you move through diverse spaces. You take what is there, you move on. The forest provides, but you cannot control it, cannot guarantee it. The risk is spread across many sources. When you plant a garden, you commit to one place. You invest labor, preparing soil, planting, weeding, protecting from pests. You have more control. You can produce surplus in a good year, but you are also more vulnerable. If drought comes, if pests attack, if disease strikes, your one source of food is threatened. You cannot simply move to where food is more abundant. Agriculture allowed populations to grow because a smaller area could support more people, but it also created new vulnerabilities. Reliance on fewer food sources meant less nutritional diversity. Dense populations meant diseases spread more easily. Stored food attracted pests and required defense. Inequality emerged as some gained control over land or surplus. Yet agriculture also made possible things that were difficult in mobile life. Monumental architecture, written language, complex governance, specialized crafts, cities, all the things we associate with civilization. These required the surplus and density that agriculture provided. The question is not whether agriculture was good or bad, but recognizing that it was a trade-off, one way of life for another. Your understanding integrates this complexity, recognizing that human history involves choices, each choice opening some doors while closing others. In your own life, you may feel the tension between freedom and security, between movement and stability. These are ancient tensions. The hunter-gatherer had freedom of movement, but little security of stored resources. The farmer had security of place and surplus, but less freedom to move. Archaeological evidence from early Neolithic sites shows that the first farmers often had poorer health than hunter-gatherers. They were shorter on average, their bones show more signs of disease, their teeth show more cavities from grain-heavy diets, yet they continued farming, suggesting that other benefits, perhaps social cohesion, perhaps population growth, perhaps the ability to stay near sacred sites, outweighed the health costs. The transition was not immediate anywhere. For thousands of years, people moved between hunting-gathering and farming, supplementing wild foods with cultivated crops, gradually becoming more dependent on agriculture, gradually losing the old knowledge of wild foods and animal tracking, eventually reaching a point where return to the old ways became impossible. Your understanding deepens, recognizing that you live in a world shaped by choices made 10,000 years ago. The cities you know, the writing you use, the specialization of labor, the technology you enjoy, all of this traces that Neolithic transition. You are living in the world agriculture made possible. For better and worse, In prehistoric societies, spiritual life was not separate from daily life, but woven through everything. One form this took was shamanism, the practice of certain individuals entering trance states to communicate with the spirit world. A shaman is an intermediary, someone who can cross the boundary between the human realm and the spirit realm, through ritual, through drumming, through fasting, through dance, through plant medicines. The shaman enters altered states of consciousness. In these states, they journey to other worlds. They speak with animal spirits, with ancestors, with forces that guide and shape reality. Evidence for shamanism in prehistoric times comes from several sources. The cave paintings, especially the figures that seem half human and half animal, may represent shamans in trance wearing animal skins, taking on animal powers. The famous sorcerer figure in the Cave of Troyfrères in France shows a being with human legs and body, but with antlers, owl eyes, bare paws. Is this a shaman in ceremonial costume, a vision of a spirit being, or both? Burials from the Paleolithic period sometimes include unusual objects, antler headdresses, collections of unusual stones, animal bones arranged in patterns. These may mark shamans, individuals who held special roles in their communities, who mediated between visible and invisible worlds. Prehistoric peoples likely practiced animism, the belief that all things contain spirit. Animals are not mere resources, but beings with their own consciousness, their own power. Rocks, trees, rivers, storms, all possess spirit, all must be respected, related to, honored. This worldview creates a sense of kinship with all of nature, a sense that humans are embedded in a web of relationships, not separate from or above nature. Your mind is absorbing this gently, understanding that prehistoric spirituality was rich, complex, meaningful. These were not primitive superstitions, but ways of relating to reality that honored mystery, that acknowledged forces beyond human control or understanding. And now, as deeper rest approaches, sense this understanding anew. Imagine that the shaman is like a bridge. On one side is the ordinary world of hunting and gathering, of making tools and raising children. On the other side is the world of spirit, of vision, of power and meaning that cannot be grasped with hands. The shaman stands between, able to walk into the spirit realm and return with guidance, with healing, with knowledge. In trance, the shaman's consciousness changes. Time may slow or vanish. The cave walls may seem to ripple and move. Animals painted on stone may seem to come alive, to speak, to offer teachings. The boundary between self and other becomes permeable. You might become the deer, understand its life, feel its fear, know its wisdom. This is not madness, but a different mode of consciousness, one that many cultures have cultivated, one that offers access to parts of reality that ordinary waking consciousness cannot reach. Modern research into altered states suggests that these experiences, while different from consensus reality, have their own validity, their own truths. The paintings in the deepest parts of caves, where darkness is absolute and acoustic properties create echoes, may have been created during or after shamanic journeys. Visions made visible, spirit animals given form. The cave itself becomes a portal, a place where worlds meet, where the painted animal is both image and presence, both representation and reality. Your understanding deepens, recognizing that consciousness is not one thing, but many, that humans have always known how to shift between modes of awareness, that spirituality is not belief alone, but experience. In your own life, you may have experienced moments when consciousness shifted, in deep meditation, in profound connection with nature, in moments of creativity when time disappeared, in dreams that felt more real than waking. These are glimpses of what shamans cultivated deliberately. Many contemporary indigenous peoples still practice forms of shamanism. The traditions have continued unbroken in Siberia, in the Amazon, in the Arctic, among Native American peoples. These living traditions help us understand what prehistoric shamanism might have been like, the use of rhythm and repetition to induce trance, the importance of fasting and isolation, the role of sacred plants, the transmission of knowledge through apprenticeship. Prehistoric peoples understood something that modern cultures often forget, that reality has more dimensions than the purely material, that spirit matters. That relationship with forces beyond human control is essential, that some questions cannot be answered by logic alone, but require other ways of knowing. Your understanding integrates this. You recognize that spirituality is not a late addition to human culture, but present from the beginning, that the human need for connection with the sacred, with the mysterious, with forces larger than ourselves, this need is ancient. It is part of what makes us human, and it continues in you. And now, as this journey through prehistoric civilizations comes to a gentle close, Let all of these understandings settle into the deepest parts of your mind. You have rested with knowledge of Göbekli Tepe, the 11,000-year-old temple built by hunter-gatherers, massive stone pillars carved with animals, evidence that spiritual life may have come before settled agriculture. This understanding is settling into you naturally. You have absorbed the story of hunter-gatherer life, not as primitive struggle, but as sophisticated adaptation, diverse diet, egalitarian social structures, deep knowledge of the land, sustainable abundance. This way of life sustained humanity for hundreds of thousands of years. You understand the progression of stone tools, from simple flakes 2.6 million years ago to polished Neolithic axes, each innovation building on previous knowledge, each generation teaching the next. The foundation of all technology, all human creativity. You have witnessed cave paintings 30,000 years old, horses and bison running across stone, human hands pressed against walls, art as spiritual practice, as communication across time, as essential human expression. These paintings speak to something in you that still yearns to create, to express, to make meaning visible. You recognize the Neolithic transition, from movement to settlement, from foraging to farming, a transformation that brought new possibilities and new challenges. Population growth, surplus, specialization, but also new vulnerabilities, new inequalities. This is the world you inherited, and you understand prehistoric spirituality, shamanism, animism, the practice of entering altered states to commune with spirit, the recognition that reality has more dimensions than the purely physical. This spiritual life was not primitive, but sophisticated, meaningful, still relevant. All of this is settling into you now, organizing at the deepest levels of your mind. Your brain is integrating these understandings naturally, effortlessly, strengthening the connections, making them part of your lasting knowledge. Thank yourself for giving your mind this quiet learning space, for opening yourself to the voices from the deep past, for honoring your ancestors, the toolmakers, the artists, the builders, the shamans who made you possible. Set an intention as you drift toward deeper sleep. Tomorrow, these insights will flow into your awareness when needed. A word will remind you, an image will surface, a feeling will guide you, and you will recognize your connection to prehistoric peoples, your kinship across thousands of generations. Your breath is slow, steady, deep. Your muscles are completely relaxed. Your mind is peaceful, quiet, open. You are safe, held by the knowledge that you are part of an unbroken chain, reaching back through time, connecting you to the first humans who made art, who built monuments, who sought meaning in the stars and the stones. As you drift now into deep sleep, into the realm where memory consolidates and dreams arise, know that these stories continue their work in you, organizing, integrating, strengthening. Your mind is absorbing everything naturally, gently, effortlessly. Sleep now, deeply, peacefully. Let yourself be held by prehistoric wisdom, by cave paintings, by stone circles, by the spirits our ancestors knew, by the knowledge that humans have always sought beauty, meaning, connection, and that this seeking continues through you. Your understanding is complete, your learning is done, now only rest remains. Soft, deep, restorative rest.